Now the first thing I'm going to do is put some masking fluid over the drawing there. I've just got a very old, cheap, it's a Pro Art Polar White brush, size 8. It's cracking and falling to bits, so it's still got a fairly decent point on it, but I've got better brushes than this, so I tend to use these for masking fluid, and then when all the paint's flaked off, I still keep them and still use them for masking fluid. What I do, that's an old Polar White brush there. What I do, I just flick off all of the old paint and give them a coat of linseed oil or some varnish or something, and keep them going for years. They make ideal scrubbing brushes and masking fluid brushes and things like that, so don't chuck your old brushes away. You can always, recycle them. So what I want to do is, I've shown this before in other videos, but it's been a while since I've done this, so I'll show it again. I've got some Masters brush cleaning soap here. You can use any soap, any hand soap, any bar of soap will do. I just wet the brush in some water, rub it round in the soap, like that, so it's all coated in the bristles there. Just kind of push it in with my finger and thumb. Just try and get some of the excess off. Just wipe it on a bit of tissue. You don't really want to take it all off, but just get the worst of it off. So just the bristles are just lightly coated in soap, and now the masking fluid won't stick to the brush, and it'll just wash out in clean cold water, and it'll be good to go for next time. The last thing you want to do is get your best sable brush and dip it straight into masking fluid, because it will ruin it. You'll get masking fluid stuck in the bristles right down near the ferrule, and they never come out. Your brush is as good as ruined, so I always use a nice old nylon brush and coat it in soap. So I'm going to be using some Pebeo drawing gum masking fluid, and what I'm going to do when I can get the top off is just dip the brush in there, I'm going to mask off all of the branches and the robin. Now some people will tell you to put this on thinly. I say put it on thickly. It's easy to control. You can get a finer line when you put it on thick. When you put it on thin, you get more of a dry brush effect on your edges. So that's why I don't agree with putting it on thinly. I like to put it on really thick, because I can push it right up to the edge and get a really sharp, clean edge. If I brush this on thinly like that, one thing, it's hard to see, and you can guarantee you'll get a ragged edge along the top there, along the edge. So I always put it on thick, not just for that reason, but for the ease of taking off as well. When it's on thin, it's actually harder to take off. So I put it on nice and thick, literally almost have it dripping off the brush, and just kind of puddle it around on there, push it right up to the edge, and I know I'm going to get a nice clean line then. But it's up to you. You can put it on thin if you believe that that's best for you. That's fine. I think I've got quite a bit more control when I put it on nice and thick. Plus I know it's coated. Everything's covered. So I'm not going to film all of this process. Obviously I'm going to do most of this off camera. It's just a repetitive process, so like I say, there's no need to film it all. But I'll just give you a few of my tips there. They're obviously not the same as other people's, because other people say put it on thin, but we're all different, aren't we? So I'll just give you a few of my own personal tips there for how I use masking fluid. So when we get to the bird, we're going to go all over the bird. And make sure when you put the lines on for the eye and everything, they're good and dark, so that when we peel the masking fluid off, we're still left with a line there, because rubbing the masking fluid or just even peeling it off, it can lift some of the graphite off as well. So I always make sure I've got a nice dark line underneath the masking fluid. I know there's a good chance it's still going to be there, when the masking fluid's been removed. Right, okay, so that's the masking fluid on and it's nice and dry. I always leave it 10 minutes, 15 minutes, probably doesn't even need that long, but I always leave it a good long while to make sure it's thoroughly dry. Nothing worse than going in there now with the paint and you've got a bit of wet masking fluid or something that drags across and it gets in your brush. It's just, oh, don't go there. So make sure that's thoroughly dry. But essentially I'm just doing a flat wash over here. And I'm going to get some puddles, look, against the masking fluid. But when we've covered the paper, we can go in and just keep sort of brushing over that. Just dry the brush a little bit, get some moisture out, and that should pick up some of the puddles there. That we've got building up along the lines of the masking fluid. One thing I am going to do is let that dry naturally. I'm not going to be tempted to get the hairdryer on here while there's masking fluid on there, so I'll just let that dry naturally. But what I'm going to do while it's drying is very carefully just get some kitchen paper and just try and get rid of some of these little beads of watercolour, because they actually dry on there. And when you're rubbing that off, as you're rubbing with your finger, what happens is, as you're going over the paper, those little bits of blue or any pigment kind of stick on your finger and in with the masking fluid, and it's kind of, it can actually leave marks on your paper. So I always like to try and just carefully just remove as much of this as I can. There'll always be a few bits on there, but pretty much most of it should come off. But just be careful that you don't actually touch into the wet paint as well while you're doing this, because obviously that's going to lift the paint and leave a mark. So just be very careful along the edges. You can see how much paint's come up, look. That could have ended up being, smeared around on the paper. Okay, so that's completely dry now. And it's tight as a drum as well because I've stretched the paper, so that's going to be really nice to paint on. Next stage, we need to take the masking fluid off. Quick tip for you, move your watercolour box out of the way and you won't get any bits in it. So nice clean hands, clean and dry. I'm just going to start to rub this off. As you can see, it's going to take a while, but it's quite a satisfying process really doing this. It's nice to see that white paper coming through and to actually be seen and actually see, should I say, what you're left with there. Anyway, I won't film all of this because this will just bore you to tears, won't it? Me just rubbing away at this, but I wanted just to give you the quick tip there of moving your palette box out of the way, and just to show you really how easy this comes off. But I can't emphasise enough, the paper must be bone dry. Don't just wait until it feels just touch dry, because often the paper can still be slightly wet underneath. Give it a lot longer than what you think. The drying time is going to vary from person to person, because you know your house might be centrally heated, or you know your house might be more humid or something, so drying times are going to vary. So I can't say leave it exactly, you know, 45 minutes or anything. It could be an hour, it could be hour and a half, it could be 30 minutes, it all depends. But if the paper's wet, that's when it's at its weakest, and doing this will expose that weakness, and it'll probably tear the paper and make a mess. So really make sure that, you know, the paper is bone dry before you do this. Okay, all the masking fluids off, all nice and clean and ready to go. Okay, so I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.